is confirmed. We have quorum, so I'm calling meeting 21 to order. Today's meeting is held by video conference. City staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference as civic buildings remain closed. The public will continue to participate electronically. You can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I ask everyone for their patience with any delays and technical issues. The clerk's staff have connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Etobicoke York Community Council page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Clerk's IT staff are available to assist members with their devices. I would like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and their videos turned off unless they need to answer questions or speak to the committee. This will make it easy for me as chair and for those watching on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on items. Members, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff to an item or ensure your video is turned on. As part of each agenda, I'll ask members to raise their hand or to unmute their mic if they wish to question city staff. I will then create a speakers list and we'll call on members when it's their turn to speak. When voting on an item or motion, I ask that members ensure they turn their video and raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I want to remind you, we must still submit or improve your motions by email. Staff are available at etcc@toronto.ca to help with your motions. Although we're at different locations meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge the land we are meeting on is a traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations in there under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and nature of your interest. Seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on December the 4th, 2020? Moved by Councillor Ford. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any petitions at this time? Seeing none, now we can go through the agenda. Bear with me. Okay, so 21.1, 5507 and 5509 Dundas Street West zoning bylaw amendment application final report. We have speakers at 9:30. Bear with me here. 21.2, 555 Rexdale Boulevard zoning bylaw amendment application final report. We have speakers at 9:30. 21.3, 933, 935 the Queensway zoning bylaw amendment application request for direction report. I'm going to move the staff recommendation, but I also have, Madam Clerk, an amendment. If you could just maybe throw that up that staff are asking to move. Etobicoke Community Council amended recommendation number 1 as follows. City Council direct the city solicitor together with appropriate city staff and or retain external consultants as may be appropriate to attend the local planning appeal tribunal, allow hearing and oppose the applicant's appeal to the zoning bylaw amendment application for 933, 935 the Queensway. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Items amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 21.4, always stop control, Viking Lane and access road from southbound Kipling Avenue, St. Albans. Councillor Ford, can you move the staff recommendations on my behalf?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Ford moves the staff recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. 21.5, exclusive right turn lane designation, Mill Road at Markland Drive. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I wish to move the staff recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Holiday moves the staff recs. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 21.6, permanent closure of portions of public highway lands abutting Dundas Street West and Kipling Avenue. That's in my ward. Councillor Ford, can you move the staff recommendations, please?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Ford moves the staff recs. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 21.7, through highway designation, railway line, Councillor Nunziata.
Yes, I move the recommendation.
Councillor Nunziata moves the staff recs. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 21.8, payment of little parking, 703 the Queensway. Councillor Ford, can you move the staff recs, please, on my behalf?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Ford moves the staff recs. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 21.9, reopening of item EY 14.8, all-way stop control, Thurldale Avenue and Duckworth Street. Need a motion to reopen. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Nunziata.
Move the recommendation.
Councillor
Mr.
Nunziata moves the staff recommendations. All in favor?
Mr. Chair, may
Oh.
it just be recorded in the negative?
Okay. Do we need a recorded vote, or Nancy, can we just record them in the negative?
Yes, we could take a recorded vote on adopting the recommendation in the letter.
Okay, recorded vote.
When I call your name, please indicate if you are voting in favor or against. Councillor Nunziata?
Councillor Nunziata, got to say you're in favor or opposed.
Oh, in favor.
Councillor Ford?
In favor.
Councillor Grimes?
In favor?
Councillor Holliday?
Councillor Holliday?
Sorry, the sound's a little finicky. I'm opposed.
Councillor Holliday is opposed. Councillor Perruzza?
In favor.
That motion carries with 4 votes for and 1 against.
Thank you. Okay, we have new business, EY 21, implementation of permit parking on Silverthorne Avenue between Kenora Crescent and Eileen Avenue. Councillor Nunziata, would you like to add that to agenda? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we also have 18, Hearn Hill, request for the city slip to attend the local appeal body by Councillor Holliday. All in favor to add to the agenda? Opposed? Carried. And that's it, correct, Nancy?
Correct. Those are all the new items.
Okay. Can we deal with Councillor Nunziata's now? Everybody okay with Councillor Nunziata's?
Um,
You okay?
Yeah, I'll move it.
Want to move the staff recommendations, Councillor Nunziata? Your recommendations?
Yes.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then Councillor Holiday's on 18 Hearn Hill. Councillor Holiday?
Thanks. May I move the recommendations?
Councillor moves the recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so heading back up to the top. Our first item, 21.1, 5507, 5509 Dundas Street West, zoning bylaw amendment. We have speakers. Let me get to them. Sorry, Nancy, could you read off the first speaker, please?
The first speaker, we have David Mackay.
Thank you. Mr. Mackay, are you there?
Yes, I am, sir.
Good morning, sir. Welcome. And you have 5 minutes, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. I did provide a presentation material. I believe that council should have it from the clerk. I don't know if that's going to be broadcast, but I will go through it and will refer to the slide deck accordingly. Good morning, Chairman Grimes, members of the Canadian Council. My name is David Mackay. I'm a registered professional planner with MHBC and I represent the applicant. First and foremost, I'd like to thank staff for working with us to get to this point. We are supportive of the staff recommendation. I would like to quickly take you through the proposal as it has evolved over time. If you are looking at the slide deck, in terms of the second slide, the lands are located at the southwest corner of Shorncliffe and Dundas within a mixed use area and site and area specific policy 367, which is intended for intensification and growth as is proposed through this application. The area, which is slide 3, along Dundas, as council's no doubt aware, is redeveloping for this intensification, obviously from east to west along Dundas. And so this site at the corner of Shorncliffe and Dundas will contribute significantly to that future growth and intensification along Dundas. With regards to going through the slides, in terms of slide 4, our original proposal by our client was for a mid-block development of a 12-story mid-rise building. Through the application process, staff strongly recommended that the proposal that our client look at additional land to consolidate the corner. So that did occur. Our client went to great expense to obtain the corner, and that allowed for the new proposal, which is on slide 5, which depicts a tall building proposal with a mid-rise component along Dundas Street, and the taller component up to 21 stories at the rear. The project now is for 259 rental units that are proposed, including affordable housing as per the recommendation in terms of the Section 37 agreement. We have provided, and if you flip through slides 6, 7, 8, and 9, developed a proposal which addresses appropriately both frontages of Shorncliffe as well as Dundas with a pedestrian scaled frontage. Access to the proposal is from Shorncliffe through a new laneway, which will be conveyed to the city. So there is city building occurring as part of this proposal. As far as I'm aware, there are 2 concerns that have been raised, and I believe the speakers will speak to this further. And this goes to slide 9 and 10 as the first items, which relate to shadow studies. And I understand that there was some concern with the shadow studies. We have reviewed those with staff. There were some minor calibration issues, which have been rectified. Staff have reviewed those. We provided those to them. And as I've noted previously through our reports, that it does not impact our opinion. There are no shadows at the March or September equinox that affect the neighborhoods area. There was a question with regards, and this is what I've included in the slide deck, regarding December shadows. As council is aware, shadows in December are the longest and therefore are not indicative of the majority of the year. There is, as shown in the morning period from 9:18 to 10:18, shadows on the neighborhoods. It then passes quickly. It does not affect the green space of Cloverdale Park. So that is also to the north. And by just after 11 o'clock is completely within the mixed use areas. So in our opinion, and I won't speak for staff, but I believe that their opinion is also that the shadows have been adequately limited as directed by the official plan policies. Ending off on the last slide, the other issue that I understand that is raised was we have negotiated a Section 37 package. There is $1 million that has been provided for community benefits, and staff have identified a list of those within recommendation 4AI. And obviously this is up to council of how that money is allocated. We have no concerns with how that allocation occurs. But I would like to note that the requests that are being made of council to direct monies to other areas are included within that list from what I can see. So with that, I'll end my presentation and I'd be happy to answer any questions of council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the deputy? Seeing none, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Councillor Holiday? Deputy Mayor Holiday?
Thank you. I did note the issue with the shadow studies in the correspondence from the residents, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about what the calibration issue was and how material it was to the changes. I have your diagram here, but I don't have the shadow study handy from the original application. So could you tell me a little bit more about what it was?
Yes, so there's 2, when the neighbors were comparing the shadow studies that our client had prepared, our client's architect had prepared, with those of Pinnacle and other projects. And right. The issue was that in the frame, as it was set out on the page, our architects had looked at Project North versus True North. And so, so visually, the shadows didn't align in terms of at 918, the shadow angle was not the same as Pinnacle, for example. So when you made them exactly the same frame visually, they then aligned. So that was one, I think, issue that the residents brought up to us, that visually it didn't appear to be correct. And in matter of fact, the frame, when you adjusted it to match Pinnacle, is exactly the same and the shadows do not change. The other calibration issue was that there was a slight mistake in terms of the timing of daylight savings time. So the 9 a.m. period was showing the 10 a.m. period, and the 10 a.m. period was showing the 11 a.m. period. When you adjusted for daylight savings time, the adjustment, because that changes year to year of when you adjust, it just moved the shadow further to the southwest at the 9 a.m. period. So at the end of the day, in terms of March, the shadow continues to be within the mixed use areas and does not fall upon the neighborhood areas. So it didn't change anything in terms of those matters.
So the 2 points were the map north versus the true north, and the daylight savings times. So that shouldn't result in like a gross change in the amount of shadow. It would be a difference, but not an entirely different shadow that's double the length. I just want to make sure.
Correct. The comparisons also were to buildings that were substantially taller. The one on Beamish is 35 stories versus our 21 stories. Similarly, on Pinnacle, those are significantly taller buildings as well.
What's the height of your building in meters? I mean, I know it's in the report, but it's easier if you tell me.
Yes, it's 68.3 meters.
68.3, and I think Beamish is about 119. Okay, thank you.
116, I believe, is what they.
116. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Our next speaker, UBS D'Souza. UCS D'Souza? D'Souza? Is the next speaker there?
I don't believe Eusebius D'Souza is here.
Okay, we'll go to the next speaker, Irene Jones.
Me? Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, members of council, for your time this morning. Also want to say thank you for all the work that you've been doing on the COVID virus. I'm sure it's all been very hard on all of you. In general, I thought this was a good report that staff had written. It was very thorough. However, as somebody who lives west of Kipling Avenue, I have a few requests to make for you to consider, which is predominantly related to the community benefits that the developer is going to provide. Most of the benefits in the staff report appear to be going east of Kipling Avenue. And as this is a new development, which is west of Kipling Avenue, Shorncliffe, basically, and Dundas Street West, I'd like to see some of the benefits spent in the immediate neighborhood. One of the recommendations, and I believe I've sent you a written list of my recommendations, is firstly with respect to the Wedgwood Pool. It's item 4IE. I'm wondering if you could just add on there and a water play facility for the area to be considered as part of those capital improvements. In addition, you know, Dundas Street West is not a very pedestrian-friendly street. It's not one of those streets that you'd really like to walk on or take a stroll on. And I'm hoping that you will include some streetscape improvements along Dundas Street West, especially west of Kipling Avenue. Some has started because of the transit hub, but we'd like to see it extended further west. There's also a large contribution for public art, which is wonderful. But we were hoping, and I say we because I belong to a little residents association, for some kind of a historical marker or plaque or some public art that recognizes and celebrates the history and the story of the Eatonville community. You may not know this, but basically the Eaton store years and years ago, this was farmland, and it's where they grew vegetables, dairy, eggs, to provide for the lunch counters in the Eaton stores. And it was predominantly farmland. And when you walk through the neighborhood, you don't actually know that you're in Eatonville. So it would be kind of nice to do something that recognizes that. In addition, as you know, we've got about 12,000 plus residential units being built and proposed west of Kipling Avenue. And I'm concerned that there won't be any substantial new green space. And one of our local green spaces is actually called Silver Hill Park, but the city doesn't own it. It belongs to the school board. And it's being used as an alternative school at the moment. Maybe sometime in the future it will need to reopen to accommodate all of the students in the area. But I'm asking if you would ask staff to report on the feasibility of acquiring a portion of that property. It's a fairly large one, to ensure that it stays as parkland. Because I know, as Councillor Grimes knows, we've seen school sites in Alderwood and Long Branch that end up getting developed, sold off and developed into residential units. And I'd like to ensure that at least some of that green space is preserved as public open space. So those are my requests and recommendations to you. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thank you. Our next deputant, Peter Morris. Mr. Morris, you there?
I am. Thank you very
much. Good morning,
much.
Peter. Welcome. You have 5 minutes, my friend.
Thank you. And my thanks to Madam Speaker, Chairman Grimes, and the other councillors. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. There's only a few areas that I wish to address. I've submitted a submission, so you may have had a chance to review that. And one of them has to do, and there's always been some discussion about that, section recommendation 4A1, and specifically the first 2 items. The first is the Village of Islington Business Improvement Area. And as much as I support seeing money directed towards business improvement areas, and there is not one in the South Eatonville, I struggle with the idea of money that's been obtained from development in South Eatonville being directed to this other part of the ward. Irene Jones has already mentioned that if we can talk about Kipling being a bit of a divide, I would say residents in our area don't, as a rule, shop in Islington Village. So I struggle with the idea that money from a development here would be directed out to a place that really, in my opinion, does not offer benefit to the residents of this community. I also see Etobicoke Centre 6 Points Park. As I said, this is not to be confused with the existing very tiny park, 6 Points Park. This is a new park that's proposed as part of Etobicoke Centre. But again, it's not, in my opinion, something that's going to benefit the residents, current residents of South Eatonville, or the people that end up living at this development. And I would ask, I see F, local park and streetscape improvements, that there's a possibility of money there. I would ask that council consider improvements. We're well served actually for parks. We have 3 great parks, Cloverdale, Greenfield, and Silver Hill. Cloverdale's, I would say, at capacity, but I would love to see some of this money spent at Silver Hill or Greenfield, and possibly a splash park. There are other things. All 3 parks have a children's playground, but none have a splash pad, and there are none in the area. And just as a practical matter, to Irene Jones's point, do not see parents taking their children to 6 Points Park or Etobicoke Centre 6 Points Park. It's just too far away, and it's a wretched walk along a 6-lane major thoroughfare. And last but not least, there's been some discussion. Actually, before I leave that, this idea of Section 37 money for capital improvements. If I was the owner of this land or the developer, I would be pushing to have this money spent in a way that would benefit the people that live in my building. And I realize it's not up to the developer or the owner where this money is spent. But, you know, as I look at our local councillor, Councillor Grimes, I would hope that, you know, you would support, and I'm sure you will, South Eatonville in having money generated in South Eatonville spent in a way that would truly benefit the residents of South Eatonville. And the only other thing I wish to talk about, it's already been mentioned briefly, the shadow study. And point taken, I'm the one that brought up the comparison with Beamish. And yes, that is a 35-story building as opposed to what we're looking at here, a 21-story building. Certainly the shadows on Beamish are going to run further along the ground. But my point is just proportion of shadow length to object height, whether it's the shadow I cast walking down the street or a tall building, the sun is equally far up in the sky. The ratio should be the same. And if we look at the shadow studies for Beamish at the equinox on March, the length of the shadow relative to the building is very long. If I look at the shadow study for 5509 Dundas, it's very short. And I just struggle to believe that the shadow from a 21-story building would barely, well, it would go maybe halfway up block at the equinox. And then, of course, in December at the solstice, again, if you look at Beamish, the shadows go on forever. And I would anticipate that the shadows from a 21-story building would be quite long at the December solstice. So I am asking that thought be given to having a really close look at the shadows, because I struggle to accept the shadows that are shown on the proposal for 5509 Dundas. So with that, that concludes my remarks. Thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Peter. It was right on 5 minutes. Thank you, sir. Any questions of the deputy? Councillor Holiday.
Yeah, thank
Mayor
you, Chair. Thank you for speaking to us. And you know what? It's a good catch on the shadow study. Like I noticed that you don't see that level of detail that often in submissions from the public to community council, and it kind of stood out. But from, if I got this right, from your comments though, you still are concerned about it. If something isn't right.
That is correct, Councillor Holiday.
Okay, I'm gonna have a chance to ask staff questions. Maybe I'll see if there's someone here that can talk about it. I want to make sure that you're comfortable coming out of the meeting as best as I can, or not comfortable if there's not something right. But I think it's a good point. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, our next speaker, Paul McDonald. Mr. McDonald,
and hello.
Good morning, sir. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear, and
welcome.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes, my friend.
Good morning, Council, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning. I live at number 20 Cabral Avenue on the north side, and when I look out my living room window, I can see between the house on the corner on Shaver and the first house on the south side of Cabral. When I look between the two houses, I see the top of the hydro building and blue sky. That is a direct trajectory from where that building is going to be built. My concern, again, is shadowing. And I have the same concerns as the previous speaker, Peter, discussed about the shadow issue. I looked at the shadow study Sunday evening, and I noticed that there wasn't a study done for December. And I sent an email to the planner. You know, being a layperson, I'm not up on the nuances and rules about shadow studies, but apparently because the proposal isn't near a park or an open space or a graveyard, the December study wasn't required, but eventually it was produced in quick session, which I was amazed at the speed of the December study, a day. And it was provided, and I have the same issues that Peter Morris has in regards to the shadow study that was done in March and September. A 21-story building that casts a shadow at 918 barely goes beyond that hydro building, halfway up the block of Shaver between Dundas and Kebrel. It lands between Islington Chrysler and the back of that hydro building. And then it recedes just behind the hydro building. When you look at the December study, the shadows go well beyond my house, almost touching Ovida. So there's several houses on the south side and north side of Kebrel that are in shadow, 9:18, but I'm sure they're still in shadow at 8 o'clock in the morning. And as the shadow progresses eastward, as the sun follows the horizon, it at 10:18, Shaver Avenue's in darkness. And then I believe an hour later, the shadow just barely goes into the parking lot of Cloverdale Park. I find that hard to believe for a 21-story building. I strongly feel that the March or June or September studies were done for the 11-story building, the initial proposal, not the 12-story. And on that note, I feel that it's going to impact my and my neighbors' enjoyment of our properties. It's bad enough that we're, a lack of sunlight in the winter. Who wants to be artificially shadowed by a tall building, a 21-story building in the winter? In the summer, I'm sure it's going to impact in the summer as well. So on that note, I'd like to see the proposal referred back to planning. I'd like to see the proposal referred back to planning for reduction in height. The building is too high and will create a shadow over my and my neighbors' properties on Kebrel Avenue and Shaver, as well as Cloverdale Park. And again, I strongly believe the shadow studies from March and September are outdated and were done on the original proposal of only 11 stories. Now, the question I have to, question is, this building is going to set a precedence on the west side of Dundas, the west side of Shaver, and is there a second plan for the lands west of Shorncliffe, as this building will set a precedent for development on lands west of Shorncliffe Avenue, east of the 427. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Questions? Seeing none, thank you. Our next deputant, Barry Horosco from Horosco Planning Law. Mr. Horosco, are you there?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yeah, good morning. We can hear you loud and clear. I think you know the process. You have 5 minutes, my friend.
Yep, thank you very much. So good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of Community Council. My name is Barry Horosco. I'm the planning lawyer for the applicant. I registered today primarily in the event any questions came up that had not already been handled by Mr. Mackay. I'm just going to address, I think, 2 of them very briefly. The question of shadows, I'm not sure if community council members were able to see the reference that Mr. Mackay made to the shadow diagrams. I'm going to leave you with a thought that you may want to ask him to come back and address those, or you may want staff to do that. There was 2 very small calibration matters that had come up, the timing and the direction. The suggestion that we're looking back at the 11-story building, I think that can be handled very, very quickly, either through staff or Mr. Mackay if you want him to come back. The slides were there. He submitted them to your clerk. The other comment I have is really a soft comment, but it's with respect to the residents' request that the money be spent more locally. My client is cutting the check for the $1 million that we're talking about here. I think if you look at, I think the question really becomes one of a drafting question. If you look at recommendation 4A that's coming to you from staff, it's 4A1. There's a list there of what they're suggesting, how the monies could be spent. And I'm going to say to you, there's flexibility already built into that recommendation in 2 ways. First of all, you'll see after they identify 5 locations, they end with the monies could be spent on local park and streetscape improvements. I believe that includes what you're being asked already without the need for amending it. I'm in your hands. I've talked to my client about it. Of course, we'd like the money to be spent locally, but we realize that this is a decision in consultation with the local councillor for the department and for city council to make that determination. It may already be there. The other flexibility you're probably aware of, the standard Section 37 agreement always indicates, and you'll see that here, if the monies aren't spent within 3 years, that staff in consultation with the community councillor can spend that money elsewhere. And so you may feel that it's already there without the need to add to that list. It's up to you. We're prepared to, we're happy either way. That's all I really have for council or community council members today. Thank you for your attention on this matter. I think we're coming forward with a good project, and you'll have, just note that Mr. Mackay said this owner came forward with an application originally on only half the site, and he ran into a snag on the site, and staff really pushed back and said, you've got to go out and acquire more land. And I got to tell you, that hardly ever happens, where an owner's application is stopped in its tracks. The owner had to go out. It took him over a year and a half to negotiate with the abutting owner and pick up the corner piece. And I think he's wound up with a project that's far, far better for the community. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are my comments today.
Thank you, Mr. Orozco. Any questions of the Deputy Mayor Holiday?
Thanks, Mr. Orozco. I wanted to, this issue over the shadow is, it's really bothering me because residents are not confident in the data that's before them. Do you have any advice? I mean, it should be easy enough to really empirically check, right? Like,
yeah,
we know the building height. Like, is there any guidance you could offer to a simple person like me? Like, is there a table or something I could look at and do my own math? I mean, I won't be able to do a map of where the shadow is, but I could at least test the length of it, given the date and the time of day and so on. Anything helpful you could add that could help satisfy it?
I'm going to give you really two comments. The first one is I'm embarrassed. I have a degree from university in geography, and you'd think I'd be able to respond to you and give you like a short, easy way of handling it. I'll start off with saying this. Shadow diagrams, when you get into really looking at them, and we spent on the approvals down in Mimico, we probably spent in mediation 80 hours going through shadow diagrams. It's unbelievable how important it all becomes. In this case, though, I've got to defer to Mr. Mackay. I'm not sure what your procedures are, but I'd like you to think, Councillor Holiday, whether you invite Mr. Mackay to come back, because he's our expert on this in conjunction with the architect. So I'm going to kind of finish speaking on that and say, I think he's the guy that may have your answer. Apart from that, I've got a diagram, an acetate overlay that I used to use from time to time. I've misplaced it years ago. I don't know where it is, but I've looked at the shadow diagrams. I don't think you've seen them in the meeting today. And I understand that residents, neighbors have a concern or a fear about it. And if it hasn't been properly explained to them, that concern is going to kind of be lingering. Staff also look at these things. They don't just accept what we say. They look through them. They may be able to help you today also, Councillor.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I think that ends our speakers. Is that correct, Nancy?
Yes, no further speakers have joined us on the item.
Okay, so questions of staff, and I'm going to like to go first if I could. I think Councillor Holiday, you have questions also? Okay, can we have the planning staff come to the floor, please? We got planning there yet?
I'm here. Yes, yes, Councillor, we're here.
I'm sorry, who is it?
It's Sarah
That's Sarah?
Henstock and Elizabeth Stewart.
Oh,
and Angela Stay is here as well.
Okay, great. So, Sarah, just to start off, I guess under Mr. McDonald's questioning, what's going to happen further west of Shorencliff? Dundas Street is identified as one of the 4 growth areas of the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And on the south side of Dundas, that's where I think city planning expect to have some height, correct?
That's correct. The site and area specific policy that pertains to this area of Dundas does speak to that. And then we also have other growth policies for the center.
And on the north side, we expect the heights to come down, correct? As that develops west?
That's correct. In terms of the way that the avenues to be shaped, the height would be further back and away from the neighborhoods.
Right. So another deputy talked about streetscaping. So as this builds out, we're looking for the developer to do all these street improvements with their development. Is that correct? So we're trying to get them to pay for the streetscape improvements as we build along Dundas, correct?
That's correct. That's typically what we do with any development. The developer would be responsible for the streetscaping on their property, and sometimes through Section 37, we do get adjacent streetscaping done as well. But we do have provision for that in this report through the recommendations.
All right, and Sarah, your department is recommending this application here today, and there's been talk of the shadowing. Could you maybe just briefly talk about the shadowing? Are you city planning satisfied with the shadowing report that was provided by the applicant to city planning?
Yes, we are. We've had our expert staff in urban design review the shadow information. Has been discussed. There were some technical issues with some of the shadow information provided, but our staff worked with the applicant to address those technical issues and have provided their comments that they're satisfied with it. This development does fit within the 45-degree angular plane to the neighborhood, which is one of our requirements. And with that angular plane provision, it does address potential for shadow impacts, and particularly at the equinox, that's the benchmark that we generally use because it does provide the balance for the sun and shadow for the year. So we do look at the summer and we do look at the December times as well, but the equinox is the primary benchmark that we use. And there's no shadow impact in the neighborhood at the equinox.
Okay. And one of the deputies alluded to this shadow study provided could have been out of date. So you're satisfied this is up to date with the current plan that's before us?
Yes, we are. We've had staff working with the applicant quite recently, up until yesterday even, to make sure that this information was correct in preparation for today. Mr. McKay may want to provide some additional details on that, but our staff are satisfied that it's correct.
Great. And Sarah, one other question, I guess on the Section 37, it's $1 million, which is really not a lot of money, but once you carve it all up, but there's been talk about moving to the east or to the west of Kipling. I think the way it's written now, it's pretty general. That this could be moved like F after number 1, local parks and street. We can move that around, and as Mr. Roscoe alluded to, after 3 years, we can work to move that money. But we've left it kind of general purposely to be able to do look after some of these improvements that South Eatonville is looking for. Correct?
That's correct. There is wiggle room in there to provide an allowance to direct it where seen fit.
So you're satisfied the way we've got the Section 37 agreement here. You're happy with that also, correct?
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I just need a quick question for Parks. Is Parks there? Can you stop my time for 1 second there, Nancy? Just looking for Parks. Is Parks on the line? No. Anybody from Parks there? No. Can we see if we can get somebody on Parks? I'll stand down my question and maybe pass it over to Deputy Mayor Holiday, but I just have a quick question for Parks if somebody get Parks on the line. So I'll just stand down my last questions and hand it to Deputy Mayor Holiday for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think you got at the heart of what I was going to ask about. I'll give it a little bit more of a try here. Do we have urban design staff on the call? I'm sorry, Sarah, I know you read off a list of names, but I didn't catch them all.
We do have Amelia Floro on the call.
I wonder if Amelia could talk a little bit about, just empirically, I want to make sure that this matter of the shadow gets really tidied up. I know you've reviewed the documents. Is there something, or is there Is there some information or methodology you could give to us that we could go and check independently? Is there an easy way to just get a rough calculation on a shadow? If you know the date, you know the location, you know the height, you could figure out, it would cast a shadow, so many meters long. Is that easily determined without getting too far into the weeds?
Councillor Holliday, I can give you some easy aspect of determining extent of shadows, and it really is the 45-degree angular plane that we use throughout. We use it in the avenues and we use it within the centers. And so 45-degree angular plane relates to the height, the overall height of the building, to the extent that the shadows are cast between March the 21st and September the 21st. And so if it's kind of a one-to-one aspect, so the height of the building to the distance that the shadow will be cast, and it determines, because of where Toronto is located, it determines where the shadows are going to extend to and whether or not that's acceptable. So it allows for an extent of sunlight on the adjacent properties, generally in the neighborhoods. So it's that one-to-one element that's an easy way to determine whether or not the shadows are acceptable and whether there's an acceptable amount of access to sunlight for the neighborhoods. So, there's the technical aspect of generating the shadows, and we review that technical report. But if you look at that one-to-one condition, then it's really helpful in determining whether or not it's acceptable.
So, I mean, I won't call it a rule of thumb, but just in the simplest terms, if you cast a radius of about 70 meters from the building, that would give you a rough sense of where that shadow is going to, because the building's about 70 meters tall. That would give you a rough sense of what you're talking about. Now, I think we can go onto the website, map.toronto.ca, and you can measure stuff. I know I do it all the time. Potentially, could somebody go on the internet and look up those tables of angles and locations? I mean, there's probably websites out there or reference books in the library. You could do that, I guess. I mean, I could do that if I really wanted to check this.
Yeah. Yes, you could. Yeah. But okay. if you look at this particular context, Dundas is quite wide here. It's more than 36 meters in width. So you realize that, with Dundas and then with the parcel of land on the north side of Dundas, then it generally would be more than the 7 meters and it 70 meters, and it would keep the shadows away from the neighborhood.
Okay, and I wanted to emphasize the point about, you look at the equinox in the spring and in the fall, and you don't necessarily look at it in the middle of summer because the sun's coming straight down, and you don't necessarily look at it on the winter because the shadows are really long. But could you just tell us a little bit more as to why you look at those equinoxes rather than focusing on the winter shadow condition?
So we do look at the December the 21st shadows, and we do look at the June the 21st shadows as well. However, we place particular importance on the equinoxes in order to ensure that there's access to sunlight within areas where people are walking, the public realm of the streets, the parks, so that it's more comfortable for people. On March the 21st, if you have access to sunlight, if sunlight is shining on you, then you feel more comfortable outside and in the cooler weather. So it extends the range of where it feels comfortable to walk outside if you're walking on the sunny side of the street, for example, or in a sunny area of the park. So those are areas that we would particularly consider. And then we also look at the impact on people's backyards and things like that to ensure that they still have access to sunlight in their backyards when they would be using them. So that's the range of how we look at shadows and how we evaluate whether or not they're acceptable.
Okay. And the shadow studies that we saw today, they don't take into account potential future development that's along the corridor. So does anybody know what's the vision for, or the as of right, or what does our plan say about what would happen on the north side? How tall would those buildings potentially be? And would those two shadows collide with each other?
So we'd be looking at mid-rise buildings on the north side, and we would be looking at ensuring that the overall height maintains the 45-degree angular plane and the heights are below the 45-degree angular plane. So any shadows that come from the south side would coincide with shadows from the north side, even though on the south side we expect that the building heights will be taller, but then on the north side the building heights will be shorter, and all of those shadows should be maintained again within that 45-degree angular plane.
Okay, so if the angular plane comes down, the buildings on the north side will be shorter, but they will also produce shadows that could be fairly long in December, and those are as of right for those landowners right now. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any, hopefully that helped if folks are listening on the call. It helped me a little bit. Mr. Chair, I didn't have any other questions, and I'll pass it back to you, sir.
Great. Is there any further questions of staff? I just want to, do we have somebody from Parks on the line or no? No. Okay. I guess we don't. All right. So on to speakers. I will speak first if I could. So I'll be moving the staff recommendations. I do want to say Dundas Street is one of the 4 growth areas in the city. And as you heard Sarah Henstock say, you know, this is one of the areas that we expect some height on the south side. Moving along on the north side, as you heard Amelia say, we're hoping for mid-rise on the north side. But we do have these policies in place. You know, the 45 angular planes take these shadows into effect. And I can tell you, from an urban design point of view, I've worked with Amelia many years down on Humber Bay Shore. She's fantastic. She makes sure she represents our residents to make sure that we have a great public realm at the bottom of these buildings. Amelia taught me that when I came as a rookie counselor. So she's been fabulous to making sure that the developers are making sure that the bottoms of these buildings are, you know, have a really good feel to them. So I learned that from Amelia. So I have a lot of faith in staff. But like I said, we have the the planning policies, the 45 angular planes in that for these shadow reasons. So I know there's a tremendous amount of growth happening on Dundas. The city center is happening there. Councillor Holiday kind of share the border there, and you'll see the section 37 that's happening here. You know, Wedgwood Park, it's in Councillor Holiday's ward, but we don't look at it that way, Councillor Holiday. So it's one community. So Leadville, very active resident association. But on the section 37, I think we have really left it open to be able to move some of that money around. And there was a comment from one of our deputies about the Islington BIA. You know, more than now that these small businesses could use this money. You know, it's $1 million carved up. So we're not talking a lot of money, but more than ever, we need to support our BIAs. And once this all gets done, when Amelia gets her work done with all these great connections from the city center to Dundas as we move along, people will, I believe, be able to have a great walk over to that Islington BIA to do some shopping there and shop local. That seems to be the theme of the day. Back to the parks. I know my former colleague, Councillor DeChano, did extensive consultation on Cloverdale Park and on Silver Hill. There was great community input on that. The request for a splash pad, I get that all the time. There's one, I talked to Councillor Holiday about it, not too far away, but the cost of a splash pad is basically $700,000. So that would eat up that $1 million very, very quickly. But I hear you loud and clear. There's more development happening. It's going to happen on Dundas. So with that, I hear the South Eatonville Residents Association loud and clear. But I think City Planning is recommending this report, and I'm happy to move it. And I think I'm happy with the Section 37 that could be moved around to help out South Eatonville with their concerns. So with that, Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair Grimes. I would just say that thank you to staff and to the residents, and in particular the residents, the level of scrutiny that you've applied to the planning documents and for bringing to Community Council's attention the matter of the shadow. Even after this call, I'll probably take a second look at them. And I'm pretty sure if I remember how to do it, I've got a book at home that tells you how to roughly calculate something based on your geographic location and time of year. A distance, and I'll take a peek at it. There's some mapping tools on the internet that can make that happen, just to make sure. But I also respect our staff, and I feel pretty confident that they've taken a look as well. But it's good to satisfy yourself in this, and I think this process here is important to make sure that members of the public are confident in these documents. I mean, that's integral to the decision-making process. And just with respect to Councillor Grimes, I'm really thrilled that some of the Section 37 money will cross borders of the wards. Those borders are arbitrary. I know Wedgwood Pool is nearby, and it's an important facility. I was just there recently skating, not on the pool, but on the skating pad next door. And that's an important park. So I'm glad that there's some investment being brought to that. And I'm quite confident that as time goes on, that money will find its place to the right allocation. And these staff recommendations look pretty flexible to me. And I think that's what we need to do in a city like this, is remain flexible so that we can respond to what the need of is at the time. And we know it's going to be quite a while before the money actually comes into the city accounts because of how the process works. So step by step. So thank you to everybody that participated on this, and I'm happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Holiday. Any further speakers to the item? Seeing none, the recommendations before us. So I ask for a recorded vote. Nancy, please.
All those in favor of adopting the item before you, please indicate how you're voting, if you're voting in favor or against. Councillor Grimes.
In favor.
Councillor Ford.
In favor.
Councillor Holiday.
In favor.
Councillor Nunziata.
In favor.
Councillor Perruzza. Councillor Perruzza.
In favor.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, moving right along. Our last item, 21.2555 Rexdale Boulevard Zoning Bylaw and Application Final Report, Woodbine. We have our first speaker, Tyler Peck, Senior Associate at Walker Knott Dravegic Associates. Mr. Peck, are you there?
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Peck. You have 5 minutes, my friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of Community Council. My name is Tyler Peck. I'm from W&D Associates. We're the applicant and planners on behalf of Woodbine Entertainment Group for this zoning bylaw amendment application. The application before Community Council is to amend the Etobicoke zoning code and the site-specific zoning bylaws for the lands to add transportation use as a permitted use on the Woodbine lands. And this will facilitate the development of a GO transit station in the southeast corner of the site, as well as other future transit facilities on the lands. The proposed Woodbine GO station in the vicinity of Highway 27 and the Metrolink rail corridor is a transportation facility to be built by Woodbine Entertainment Group at their expense and to be conveyed to Metrolinx. This is a project in the public interest of both the city and the province. This application would permanently implement an existing approval of the Committee of Adjustment in July of 2020 to permit transportation uses on the site for a 5-year temporary basis, along with ancillary retail uses and a 0-meter lot line setback for transportation uses to the railway corridor. The approval of this application also importantly implements long-standing transportation policies and mapping in the official plan, as well as site and area specific policy 296 for the Woodbine lands, which explicitly contemplate transit facilities on these lands. A separate site plan application has also been filed with the city for the Woodbine GO station itself, and that application is currently under review with staff. We agree with the staff report in front of Community Council that the proposed amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan and the official plan. We do, however, have concerns with the Section 37 mechanism proposed by staff through their report to secure matters which in our view would appropriately be addressed through the site plan approval and other available processes. We therefore request that the staff recommendations not be sent to City Council at this time, and we will continue to work with City staff to resolve and clarify the mechanisms of addressing the access and other transportation related matters that are raised in the staff report. As this represents a significant private investment in public transit infrastructure, we want to ensure that we're moving forward in a manner that works for both the city and Woodbine Entertainment Group. And our team will work with staff with a mutual goal of addressing this by the next meeting of Community Council on March 3rd. Thank you for consideration of my remarks today, and I will make myself available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peck. Any questions of the deputy? Seeing none. Questions of staff, Councillor Ford?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I think, did Councillor Perruzza have a question for the deputy? I thought he...
I didn't see that.
I thought he...
No. You know what? I would have I could have lots of questions, but I'm not going to ask any. Don't worry, Councillor. Although I will reserve, I do have a couple of questions for the staff.
I think Councillor Ford's intentions to defer. I'm not too sure, but I'm going to get to Councillor Ford. You have a question, staff? Or are you just going to speak?
Yeah, I just have one quick question.
Staff? Okay.
So
questions for staff?
yeah, so very briefly, so is Sarah on the line here?
Sarah, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. So, hey, Sarah. So through you, Mr. Chair, we have had a number of meetings throughout the last number of months, community planning with Woodbine. A lot has progressed. Would you say this is, 95% to the finish line, this zoning bylaw amendment final report?
Through the chair, I would agree with that estimate. We're looking at the ways that some of the matters are secured. That's the question. So it's not the basis of the application that we're talking about. There's no changes to that. It's how some matters are secured.
That's correct. So we've worked on a deferral motion. Are staff in agreement with that and okay with that?
Through the chair, yes. We've seen the motion and we're in agreement with that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, staff.
I'll ask one quick one.
Deputy Mayor Haldane.
Thank you. To staff, has there ever been any consideration of commuter parking in all of this context? And it may not be specifically for this report, but it occurred to me that just the demand for that is on the rise in the city because we're losing it along the Bloor subway line. Does that fit somewhere in their mix? Or is there some flexibility for that, or maybe over the future? Because there's still a lot of parking spaces around this area that may not necessarily be utilized during the middle of the day.
Through the chair, yes, commuter parking is part of what we are considering in the smaller context and then the broader context. At this point, there's 1,000 parking spaces that are being proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you. So no further questions. I'm going to hand over to Steve.
No. I did say that I did have a couple of questions of staff, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Pruitt, Councillor Ford's going to defer this. Do you know this is intended to defer?
You know what? I'm happy. I'm happy to support the councillor, and I would have done that in any case. But there's just a couple of things. So in looking at this report, I'm to understand that that there's an implication that improving public transit to this very, very large site is beneficial to the site, beneficial to future employment and employment uses, correct? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Through the chair, sorry, I had a minute to take myself off mute. That's correct.
Wonderful. And you would agree with the statement that says that the more transit you get to this site, the more beneficial to the site, the more beneficial to employment uses, future employment uses, more beneficial for the city as a whole in this area, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. Generally, transit is seen as being supportive of growth and development in many areas. That's how we've looked at it across the city, and you can see that in some areas we've had more uptake on growth and development. Others, we're anticipating it and we're getting interest now. It just kind of depends on the area and the amount of development and type of opportunities there are for development. But generally, transit is seen as something that brings intensification and growth and development to different areas.
Wonderful. And I'll admit, I skimmed the report. And correct me if I'm wrong and didn't see it. Is there a statement in there somewhere that says that this site would benefit immeasurably if the Finch West LRT were extended from Humber College to the site? Is there a statement to that effect in this report?
Yes, there is. If you need some details on that, Louisa Galley, who's the manager for the area, could provide additional details. But yes, it is covered in the report.
And could you just take me to that very, very quickly in terms of what that says and what the implications of that might be? Because I'm just pulling up the report and I looked at it and I didn't see it.
Okay, we'll just take a second to try and provide that direction.
Please.
Sorry, Councillor, offhand, this is Louise Galley. I'm not sure exactly on what page it's located on. However, the report speaks to the fact that there has always been a vision that the Finch LRT, which currently ends at Humber College, would extend further down number 27, Highway 27, and there would be a potential location on this site, sort of kind of mid-location along 27. So there's always been that thought.
Yeah, no, and my thinking precisely, Louise, and I'm just looking through the report. How many meters is Humber College away from where the integration of GO and the LRT might happen on this site? I just want to get an understanding of that because I think that that's important.
I don't know offhand, but I would say it's probably a kilometer away because Humber College is further north.
Okay, so I'm scrolling through the report here, and I just want to see what that statement is because, and if the councillor is going to defer it, and I'm going to support the deferral, and I would support the local councillor and what he would like to do here. But I guess what my question to you would be is how can we make that statement as strong as possible and repeat it as loud as possible so that people understand that these lands would benefit immeasurably by that final connection, which is only a couple of hundred meters away. That line currently terminates a couple of hundred meters away from this site. I guess I'm going a couple of hundred meters in my own brain. I don't know. This is why I asked you what that distance was.
Yeah. So on, you'll see something on page 14 that speaks to the growth plan. But what I can tell you is that by allowing for the transportation use on the site, it would allow for more than just the GO station. It would allow for the future LRT. And Woodbine has always in their plans kind of reserved a location on the site where this LRT could be located. And that was one of the...
Okay. So this is the statement here. The proposed transportation use would allow for future transit facilities to be located on site, such as a new GO station or LRT facility that could be connected to. That's the statement and the extent of the statement that we're going to include in all of the future planning reports related to this site.
Well, I mean, I think by just allowing for that transportation use, it allows for any kind of future connections to happen on the site.
No, I understand that, Louisa, but certainly, yeah. I mean, like, basically, 2 words in this report say LRT facility. That's it. That's the extent of, from what I see here, as the mention of the LRT or the future LRT. Sure to goodness we could sort of find a few more words to at least include a couple of sentences that would make that somewhat clearer in terms of what we're talking about, right? There was always talk of taking the Eglinton LRT out to this area. I get it. You might not want to sort of, be that specific, but the Finch West LRT terminates, I don't know, 200, 300, 400 meters away from here, and certainly if you could come up with a couple of punchy sentences that added those beautiful planning phrases that you guys know far better than I, that encouraged and that made that that shone a light on the notion of that LRT being coming to the site and these lands benefiting from that connection immeasurably. I think that would be very helpful to everybody. And then if you could evolve that into some clearer phrases about how the beneficiaries of those lands could contribute to that potential connection. I think from a planning perspective, that would also go much further. So I think maybe we can think about that a little more and use some of the the planning terminology that then the planners can defend going forward, both at the city council level, at LPAT, when you're sitting down negotiating with developers, when you're negotiating with the future landowners of this area, to say, look, we got a statement in this thing, in this official plan that says that getting that Finch West LRT connection here really benefits you folks. So, and we have some ideas on how it can be paid for. So we should move forward on that basis, right? So I would encourage you to do that. That's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, if I could just pop in. What we try and do in our reports is provide a balanced approach. It's a good point, and we'll take that into consideration. As transit plans grow and change in different areas, we do try and get a bit more specific. Once stations are approved, and once, again, when they're funded, and there's a bit more direction as to some of the connections, we do try and get a bit more specific with it, but we take your point, and we'll see as this area grows and changes, and as the transit plans become more concrete and directive, then we can provide that information in the future.
But on that point, I don't want to belabor this, but I guess what I'm saying to you as city builders, that's city building. So that's sort of getting ahead of the argument on city building. So instead of making it on the back end when somebody comes in and says, oh, now there's money to build an LRT. So then you say, well, let's talk about the LRT and what that means to the lands and doubling up on densities or whatever those arguments are. What I'm saying is, including those phrases so that growth promotes those extensions, and growth pays for or helps pay for those extensions that ultimately benefit those lands.
Councilor Prutz, I've been you're over 10 minutes, my friend.
That's also my speaking time, Mr. Chair.
Good.
I have nothing more to say on that. I think I made the point. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilor Ford to speak.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll table the motion in front of Community Council as soon as it gets up on the screen. So it's more of a technical words, but it is a deferral. Let me see if I can pull it up on my screen here as well. So number one is to adjourn the statutory public meeting under the Planning Act to March 3rd, which is the next time Community Council will meet. And then in the meantime, we're going to give direction to community planning and all other necessary staff to continue discussions with the applicant in order to address matters described in the final report, including the means of legally and financially securing said matters throughout without the use of a Section 37 agreement, and to bring this back to the March 3rd Community Council with the outcome of those discussions with the applicant. So look, this Woodbine has been in the works for a number of years. Today, we're talking about the transit station, which is a huge part of this development. But what I always bring it back to is the overarching development itself, which the Woodbine lands are larger than the downtown core of the city. So, you know, we want to make sure we do this right. As I asked city staff, we're about 95% of the way there. City staff have done a fantastic job throughout this whole, redevelopment, and particularly on the transit use we're talking about today. And Woodbine has been, a terrific corporate partner and corporate neighbor in the community, making these investments upwards of over $100 million. These aren't small investments. Which, as Councillor Perutz has said, and I thank him for his questions, and I agree with what he's talking about, particularly with the LRT and expanded transit. I have had a number of discussions with city staff on that, with the province, and I think one day that is definitely going to be a reality. So I look forward to working with Councillor Perutz on that as the Finch West LRT travels through his community as well. But look, this investment's not just going to be an investment in North Etobicoke for Woodbine, but for the community. It's bordering a very large commercial community as well. So no doubt would be a benefit to them. So look, we're almost there. I think we're going to take the month and a half to meet again, or the 2 months to meet with Woodbine, with our city staff and my office, to get a path forward that works well for everyone, and send this to City Council with 100% confidence in what we all want out of this project. So I will end my remarks there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Well said. Seeing no further speakers, Councillor Ford's motion was on the screen. And just before we deal with that motion, since Councillor Ford is deferring this public meeting till March 3rd, 2021 at 9:30, I'd like to point out that no further notice on continuation of this statutory public meeting will be given. So with that, Councillor Ford's motion is on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Nancy, back to you with the bills.
We're just getting the motions up on the screen for you.
No problem. That the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws 2 to 4 prepared for the January 8, 2021 meeting 21 of the Community Council. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. That the Etobicoke York Community Council pass and declare as bylaw confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings at the Etobicoke York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 21 on January 8, 2021. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn by Councillor Nunziata. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Nancy.
Have a nice day.